All right, so let's talk water real quick. West Virginia water, to be specific. Know a little bit about that. Grew up on it, drunk a lot of it for good, bad, or indifferent. Played in it, swam in it, lived in it, all that stuff. West Virginia water has always been a contentious issue, but this is a universal thing because water is always been political. Look at the history of the world. Wars are fought over water. There's always been conflict over water. Politics involves water. Treaties involve water. Most of our states and territories and treaties and things like that are based off of bodies of water. The borders of our country, bodies of water. Water's always been important. So if people go like, well, water's not political. Water's always been political. It has to be. We are, of course, mostly made up of water. Water is the foundational building block to life as we know it, and you got to have it to survive. So water is not only really important, it's always going to be political. It's always going to be a problem. And infrastructure-wise, it's also something that's expensive to maintain and convene. Now, let's go to West Virginia specifically. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey is going on what he's calling a listening tour. After over 18 months in office, he's finally going to go highlight the water issue. Now, to be fair, it's not like he's completely ignoring it. They have moved millions of dollars into it, but the problem is they're putting a couple $100 million in a bucket that is like tens of billions of dollars deep, and it's not going to be enough to really make too much of an issue for a whole lot of folks. Now, that's not all his fault. West Virginia water's been bad for a long time for a lot of reasons. One is the water tables in West Virginia are just weird. The geography, there is also the environmental stuff, of course, because of, coal companies and other industrializations doing pollution. That's absolutely a thing in the coal fields. And some places just have really bad water. I grew up in going to church in a place called Hico. That's where Route 60 and Route 19 cross. This is not a geographically obscure area. This is two of the most important roads in the whole state. This is only minutes away from the New River Gorge Bridge. You can see the church I went to from the road when you go through there. That's the big brick one right there, Sunday Road Baptist. Love those folks. But one of the things when I was a kid, one of the things we had to do before you had church is you had to go in there a couple hours before, if not the night before, go down in the basement and go in the bathroom in the kitchen and run the tap water for a couple of minutes. Because what came out, I don't think you could really call water. It smelled like rotten eggs. It was that sulfur goop stuff. It was red. It was thick. And after a couple minutes, it started clearing up and you could get some usable, potable water out of it. But still wasn't the best stuff. But you had to do that because if you didn't do that, you'd have that smell in there all the time. It'd be hard to have church and focus on God and all the rest of the stuff. Sure couldn't eat your casserole in peace. And you don't want that kind of stuff when people are trying to use the bathroom and the toilets and wash their hands and all that. So you had to go in there and do that. And that's in a place that most West Virginians have driven by. This is not like an obscure place. Hico to this day. Even a couple of years ago, the New Hope Water District was all over the news with trying to get new contracts in and try to get water to that area. They still don't have good water, even with the new national park going in next door. This is just an ongoing issue. So now you go into the coal fields, which are much more remote and much less prosperous and get much less tourism, and you got a real problem. Water infrastructure has always been an issue. Now, about this listening tour, the old saying goes, it's better to be listened to than heard because, at least grammatically, listened to is more active and focused and heard is more passive and automatic. I'm not sure the listening tour is going to go really well when the governor shows up and says, I'm going to listen to you, for people who say we haven't been heard for decades. Why is this going to be different? And they got a point. And to do a play on words of what we call this program, Heard Tell, is they'd want to be heard. They wanted to be heard the first time. They need to be heard today and tomorrow and next week, but mostly they just need it fixed. They don't really need more people coming and talking to them about it because everybody knows what the problem is. Like a lot of other issues like education, like healthcare, like road infrastructure, which is the cousin to water infrastructure, like economic development. When you have declining population and declining economy, things are not only expensive, they're much more costly. Not just in dollar signs, but politically and in allocating limited resources. When you have smaller populations that have been declining for years, their infrastructure is much more costly, not just the dollar sign, but now you've got to tell politicians to allocate money for areas that electorally don't matter as much as either. There's this great wordplay going on in the state of West Virginia. When you allocate money for the Panhandle, or you allocate money for Morgantown or Charleston, or places like Bridgeport that have good economic development and places going, even places like Summersville, my hometown, where, economically they're getting by in a little bit of growth because the hospital's there and tourism and the state park and things like that, and they got a road going through it. You hear words like investment and we're going to invest and we're going to build up and we're growing, even if it's marginal, like in places in Somersville, or exponential growth, like places in Martinsville and in the Panhandle areas. Growth, investment. When you get into the coal fields and you got to start spending a lot of money on water infrastructure, though, now we got to talk about being cost efficient and being stewards of money and being careful with things. We hear the same thing with school consolidation. We hear the same things with roads. Hear the same thing with healthcare and welfare programs. When it's the poorer areas that need a lot of money but aren't, and people don't want to use the word worth it, but electorally, it's a harder lift to try to justify it. Now, all of a sudden, we got to be fiscally responsible. And the governor and people that say that have a point. They're not wrong. There's only so much money to go around. And poor people have to be subsidized. Rural people have to be subsidized. Otherwise, they don't exist. Now, you have the whole argument of, well, should they live rurally in the first place? We'll set that aside for the minute, because if they're too poor to get by, they're too poor to move to. People don't want to talk about that part of it either. But water is something's a little different. Yeah, it's a commodity. Yeah, you got to pay for it. Yeah, you got to have infrastructure, but you cannot live without water. So it does quickly become more of a moral issue than just a policy issue, because people have to have water and you got to get it to them. And it's not cheap. It's not cheap running 30, 40 miles of water line. It's not cheap setting up septic systems and wastewater and runoffs. Now, there's some emerging technology that could work with this, but that requires investment. People that have the investment in that kind of technology, are they going to really want to go into Boone County or McDowell County or Clay County or Webster County or pick one, Mingo, wherever? Are they going to really want to go into places like that where they're not going to get a return on their investment just to prove it can work, when they can go into places where it can work and they can make money? Again, you're going to have to subsidize it. It requires massive amounts of money. Now, normally, the secret sauce of West Virginia politics is you shake one fist at Washington, D.C. and talk about how terrible they are, while the other hand's out making sure you get your cut of money from them at the same time. We know federal money is going to be involved here. I know Shelley Moore Capito, the senator from West Virginia, has some stuff on the books right now specifically for water infrastructure projects, and hopefully we got that. The governor on this listening tour is going to tout how many hundreds of millions of dollars they're going to divert to try to get this, both state and federal money. And those are all good things, badly needed, and you take what you can get. But again, you're talking tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in a tens of billions of dollars problem, and it's a problem that's going to keep getting expensive, much like the road debate, where if you filled every pothole and bad road in West Virginia, however many billions of dollars that would take, within 3 or 4 years, you got to do it again because it's an ongoing cost. That's the problem with infrastructure. And a lot of these areas in the coal fields especially have just been neglected for so long, and then you have a flood or two or a natural disaster or the hill slides down or whatever. We've all seen the pictures from the flooding in McDowell County where they just had to run the pipes right off the edges of the embankments because there's nothing else you could do to try to get the pipes going. That's all expensive stuff. It's hard for a governor, and this is why this listening tour is probably politically sounded much better on the slide deck when they pitched it than it's going to be standing in front of the people trying to get it done. You know, the people that he's trying to listen to that wish they'd been heard the first time. The problem is the governor can't just say this is a really hard thing to fix. We don't have a good answer for it, and I can't justify the money to give you all the infrastructure you actually deserve to have. He can't say that politically or morally, and the folks don't want to hear that, and they shouldn't want to hear that. Same time, the folks can't just say to the governor, yeah, we get it, we're expensive, and there's not a lot of us, and that's a bad political combination. So the entire conversation is skewed right from the go. But again, this isn't just talking about normal infrastructure. This is water. You got to have it to live. Should people have to go to the Piggly Wiggly or wherever or IGA and buy water or ship it in? Probably not in this day and age, but they do, and that's the reality of it. So if the reality is bad, the rhetoric has to at least match the reality before we can go forward on trying to fix these kinds of problems. Rhetoric and reality is a big problem right now. Rhetoric and reality make good clicks, but they don't make good policy because they clash. And trying to get water to places that have had bad water for decades, and that's not the governor's fault or anybody else's fault. It's just kind of what it is because it's been neglected for a long time. That doesn't have a rhetoric fix. So the governor going on his listening tour, I think, is going to be one of those things where, yeah, the old saying is, well, I'm listening to him, and that's better than just being heard. Problem is there's no amount of listening that's going to fix this, and there's not an amount of words that's going to fix it. And the dollar signs that the governor has at his disposal isn't enough to fix it either. And we all see the headlines. The governor's got some political enemies within his own party right now that'll be happy to use this, like everything else, to bash him for. A little bit of it will be deserved, but a lot of it's just stuff he got handed. But the way he handles it going forward, he's going to be judged harshly on. Listening ain't enough. These people need to be heard. They need to be witnessed. And more than anything else, they need some kind of a tangible fix to have a little bit of hope going forward. Even if you can't fix it all, even if you can't run top quality water infrastructure into Mingo County or Boone or wherever, at least give them some hope of, hey, we can figure something out here. We'll get some technology in here. We'll set up a different kind of water district. We'll get some kind of public-private, whatever you want to go with. Just something. Try something. Because right now it's been a whole lot of head patting and a lot of words that maybe they got listened to, maybe they got heard. Nobody's doing anything about it because it's very expensive. Be honest about the expense of it. Be honest about the logistical challenges of it. Have some real conversations, but end it with a little bit of hope of there's federal and state money coming to fix this. We do hear you and listen to you and know you exist. We know you need water. Otherwise, people are going to keep showing up with the Capitol with jars of water that are bad. And they're not making that up. I saw it when I was growing up. Lots of people still dealing with it today. And in the year of our Lord 2026, yeah, it shouldn't be that way. But shouldn't doesn't get anything done. You got to get money and you got to get a plan. And it's incumbent on our leaders, the elected ones especially, to provide that and explain it and give us rhetoric that meets reality so that these folks can have a little hope for the future that something as simple in our modern age as turning on the tap and getting some usable water out of it is a reality for most West Virginians. Just imagine how politically expedient that kind of a success story could be for somebody. Why don't we give it a try?